Good morning. Today we're, of course, celebrating the fifth Sunday of Lent, and it means that we're turning something of a corner in the Lenten season and entering into what has traditionally been known as Passiontide, or sometimes called Deep Lent. It's because we're on the brink of the holiest time of the year. Soon we'll enter into Holy Week and be consumed by the events leading up to and including Jesus' Passion. Sometimes, you may remember this from another day, it's customary to cover the statuary and holy objects in a church as an outward sign and a reminder of Jesus' impending death and the extra solemn nature of this time. That's where we are now. And in the gospel, too, Jesus is turning a corner in his ministry. He is entering into the deepest part of his ministry and the cascade of events that will lead to his passion. The rising of Lazarus is the final miracle and the last big event of his ministry before he turns and heads into Jerusalem for the Passover and ultimately, of course, his death and resurrection. And our Lenten journey mirrors this. And this miracle of bringing Lazarus back to life is the last straw that seems to seal Jesus' fate. While the gospel passage that we heard today concludes by saying, "Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what Jesus had done began to believe in him." That's good news. This is evidence of conversion happening in real time, but it doesn't tell the whole story of the situation. When we turn to the Bible and continue reading beyond today's passage, it goes on to say, "But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done." And from there, the Sanhedrin, the ruling council, will convene and begins to plot Jesus' death. This was the final offense for the religious leaders whose animosity toward Jesus had been growing over the course of his entire ministry. Now, historically speaking, it seems like the cleansing of the temple is often considered to be the most direct cause for the crucifixion. The cleansing of the temple, of course, is the episode where Jesus forcefully throws the money changers and all of that commerce out of the temple precinct. And that would have been a significant event. It's one that would get both the attention of the religious leaders, for sure, but also the civil authorities as well. It's the kind of thing where if Fox News and CNN existed in that time and place, they would be reporting on nothing else for days on end other than this rabbi at the temple who threw out the money changers. This is because it happened at Passover, and Passover in Jerusalem was a volatile time. The population of the city at least doubled as pilgrims came to town for the feast, and peace was enforced, an uneasy peace, really, was enforced through the threat of Roman brutality. Anything that might cause a riot, like throwing the money changers out of the temple, would certainly have Rome's attention. There's a reason that Jesus ends up on a cross. I know we hear a lot about how an illegal religious trial was held in secret to convict him of blasphemy, and that eventually will bring him before Roman authorities, but they aren't executing him for religious blasphemy or because the high priest asked them to. They crucify him alongside political thugs because all three of the people who were crucified that day represented a threat to stability. Roman authorities put Jesus on a cross because it benefited them too. And what's interesting is that the Gospel of John, which we heard from this morning, presents the cleansing of the temple early in Jesus' ministry, at the very beginning. So perhaps John is showing us it as occurring during Jesus' first trip to Jerusalem for Passover as an itinerant rabbi. Today's gospel, then, with the rising of Lazarus, bookends that ministry with this other very disturbing miracle. These are both major and unsettling events. On one hand, at the beginning, the cleansing of the temple, and a couple years later, on the other end, the rising of Lazarus. The first got Rome's attention, and the second was when religious leaders had just finally had enough. So from this point forward, from the rising of Lazarus, as Jesus heads into Jerusalem for the Passover, he will be laying low, keeping away from authorities who are now out to get him. That's why he will retire at night to the village of Bethany, which is only about 2 miles from the city, from Jerusalem. Most pilgrims are camping out on the Mount of Olives. As you know, as we know, the Mount of Olives is where Jesus will soon be arrested on Holy Thursday, meaning that he could have gone back to Bethany after the Last Supper, but instead goes to the Mount of Olives because he wants to be arrested at that point. So with today's gospel, Jesus' ministry has turned a corner, and there's no going back. He's fully committed now. And we now mirror this reality as we enter into deep Lent and soon into Holy Week. But this isn't meant to be just a Lenten thing for us to remember. It's meant to be a microcosm of our own discipleship, our own lives. We need to turn a corner that leads us into deep faith, our own passion tide, if you will. We need to be committed to Jesus just as much as he was committed to us when he cleansed the temple and called Lazarus back to life. Two events that both speak to who he is and would set the world in opposition to him. There's no half measures in Jesus' ministry, and so there are no half measures in the Christian life. Sitting on the fence when it comes to who Jesus is or the truth of his moral teachings is to make a decision, and it's to be on the wrong side of salvation history. Jesus' disciples are not called to sit on the fence, but to be all in with him, no matter the earthly costs, just like he was. Deep Lent and Holy Week compel us to consider anew, are we striving for sainthood? Are we promoting the kingdom that is so often rejected by the world? Are we prophets who, like Jesus, speak the Father's love and truth into the world, especially on difficult matters that the world just doesn't want to hear about? The sanctity of life from the womb to the nursing home, the true and only design for marriage and family, Jesus as the only way to the Father, and so the necessary futility of non-Christian religion. Being a disciple of Jesus means becoming a target of misunderstanding, of ignorance, and sometimes outright evil. There's no point in hiding from these. There's no point in being afraid of these things, but there's also no point in hiding from them. Jesus didn't. Jesus entered into his passion, and so must we. Besides, our place right now is to be a light among those things, among the misunderstanding of the world, the ignorance of the world, and simply just what the world doesn't know, right? And among the evil that is present in the world. We can't hide from them on our journey to sainthood. Our journey to sainthood runs over and through these things, exposing them and casting them out, casting out darkness so that the light of Christ can prevail. The mysterious nature of God's methodology is that as he calls us back to life like Lazarus, it is so that we can die with him on the cross for doing what we ought. He gives us life in the world so that we can lose it the right way. Out of the tombs of sin and out of the tombs of fear, out of the tombs of ignorance, out of the tomb of half-hearted Catholicism, we are called to the glory of the cross. In the words of St. Rose of Lima, apart from the cross, there is no other ladder by which we may enter heaven. Brothers and sisters, let us be stirred to life, to have the faith and the courage, now certainly, but always, to be all in, to exercise no half measures with our discipleship. Jesus has shown us the way, invites us to follow him, the only way home to the Father, and to the sainthood that he desires for each one of us and every person that we know.